Welcome to another edition of Crime News with Mark Solomon. It's Wednesday, July 21st, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about 5 things. First and foremost, the Lori Vallow case. New emails have been released. Very shocking details. We're going to be talking about that first. Next, we're going to be talking about the Tiger King. His sentence was vacated, interestingly enough. There was another case in Colorado, similar circumstances. The Colorado Supreme Court said the same thing about that. That's number 3. Number 4, there was a father in Colorado who was convicted of murdering his son. That's the Mark Redwine case. And finally, we're going to be talking about some very disturbing comments that were published in the Aiden Fuchi case. Stay tuned. But before we get to that, don't forget to click like with subscribe with a little bell next to it to be notified of future videos. If you're enjoying this video, the next one might be better. Could be worse. Probably not, though. Click the bell. You'll find out first. So let's talk a little bit about that Lori Vallow case. Let's just skip right over to the emails that were released. That's just insane. What happened was Lori Vallow, as everybody here probably aware, was implicated in the death of her 2 kids. And recently in Arizona, she was indicted on a conspiracy charge in the death of her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. These emails are just absolutely astounding that these things were released, and basically thousands of emails in response to requests by media and people who just wanted to know. And essentially what they're saying is that of the 2,500 emails released by the Chandler Police Department, the last known photos of Joshua Vallow was on his mother's iCloud account, and this was the email of him sitting there in his red pajamas. In addition to the deaths of her children, Vallow also faces a conspiracy to commit murder charge in Arizona in connection with the 2019 July death of her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. That's what I wanted to talk about here. He was fatally shot by Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, in Chandler, Arizona. He claimed that it was self-defense. It was never prosecuted. He died in December 19 of natural causes. And let's just skip for a second to the Lori Vallow death timeline for reference. I think this makes it easier to figure out. Basically, Joseph Ryan, April of 2018. Year later, Charles Vallow on July 11, 2019. Tylee in September, along with JJ of the 2019. Tammy Daybell, October 19, 2019. Now, among the revelations of the emails are that detectives learned that Vallow booked a flight from Idaho to Phoenix, Arizona on October 8. The very next day, Alex Cox attempted to shoot Tammy Daybell, prosecutors are alleging. She was married to Chad Daybell, a doomsday fiction author at the time. So let's just think about that for a second. She goes from Idaho to Phoenix, Arizona on the 8th, and on the 9th, Tammy Daybell is shot at. She claimed that it was Alex Cox. These emails tend to corroborate the notion that Tammy was in cahoots with Alex the day before that attempt on her life happened. So Lori and Alex apparently, according to prosecutors, conspired, and now they have the emails to prove that. Very fascinating stuff. She died a few days later. Vallow booked a return flight to Idaho the next day, and then she and Daybell were married a few weeks later. By November 19, the Rexburg police performed a welfare check on Joshua Vallow at the request of his grandparents who had not spoken. Lori lied about his whereabouts, claims the authorities. And when the police tried to search warrant the next day, the Daybells were gone and gone to Hawaii. Chad Daybell is expected to stand trial later this year. We're following that one. And just, absolutely amazing that these emails prove what we've all been saying, that Lori was absolutely connected with that, and that she was, in fact, in Arizona when that attempt happened. So there you go, folks. Let's go ahead and move to our next story, the Tiger King. He was sentenced to 22 years for the murder for hire scheme that did not work on Carol Baskin. And this case came through the 10th Circuit of Appeals, which Colorado happens to be there, in the 10th Circuit. And when he was sentenced, this is Maldonado Passages, that's his real name. His convictions were upheld and he will be resentenced. He's not getting released from prison. What actually happened was, because his murder for hire plots weren't lumped together, his sentencing guidelines increased from 210 to 262 months, up to 262 to 327 months, which the Court of Appeals said should not have happened. In other words, he was sentenced at a much greater range than he should have. The judge considered a longer range of sentences than were permissible under the circumstances. And if you think about that, it makes sense. He sentenced him on two different charges as opposed to lumping him together and then doing the calculations all on one. And that's what is going to happen on the resentencing, which is scheduled to happen soon. Next thing we're going to talk about is a similar case that happened here in Colorado. And again, this case just came out 2 days ago. Same sort of thing. The appeals court finds that an Adams County judge violated the Sixth Amendment with sentencing. The case implicated here is Blakely v. Washington, in which a majority of justices find that trial courts infringe on the Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial when they impose a sentence that exceeds a standard range. This is not the same issue. Don't think for a second that I'm saying that these two cases are identical. They're not. The Tiger King case is in federal court. This case is in Colorado court. But it's interesting that they're coming out at about the same time. So let's go back to that. Colorado Supreme Court advised that there are certain circumstances when a judge can increase a punishment beyond the range, and they list those. A jury found him guilty of second degree assault and child abuse against his children. And on appeal, they had raised that the sentencing range was 2 to 8 years, and they had opted for a range of 1 to 16. And unfortunately for the judge in that case, they did not make a record sufficient to be able to uphold that increased range. That 2 to 8 would have been permissible. When the judge increased it to 16, basically what the Colorado Supreme Court saying is that had to have fallen into one of the 4 exceptions. That the jury had to have found facts. The court must have found aggravating or mitigating facts to support that. A couple more of that didn't happen. I won't bore you with any more of the details there. Let's go ahead and get back to the 4th case that I wanted to talk to you about, also in Colorado. This is the Mark Redwine case, where, again, this was July 16. This was last Thursday. Colorado dad found guilty of killing the son who found his lewd diaper pics. Now think about that. This son found his father's suggestive pictures of him when he was in diapers, and the father killed him for it. The son was 13 at the time and killed him in a fit of rage. Mr. Redwine was tried, and the verdict came back as guilty. Because of that, he will be sentenced, and his sentencing is currently set for October 8, and that's when he is going to be looking probably at a life imprisonment. We'll see. We'll throw that on the calendar and make sure to come back to that. The last issue I wanted to talk about today, it's not so much of a case update, but it is something that I found, I read. I thought you, as my loyal viewers, would appreciate or be as appalled as I am. That's in the Aiden Fuchi case. Hats off to NBC News. They didn't even list the defendant's name in this case. I don't know if that's because they don't want to give the defendant any notoriety or because he is a juvenile. We all know who he is, so I'm saying it. The teen Aiden Fuchi, who has been accused of stabbing a girl 114 times, was spoken to by a judge. And here, when he learned about his classmate's death, he offered a seemingly indifferent response, officials said. "How is that my problem?" he asked, according to documents released by the state attorney. How is that my problem? Now, on one hand, you could say, well, that's just a denial. And on the other hand, you could say, here's a seemingly cold-blooded person who just doesn't think that the 13-year-old girl's death matters. I'd love to know what you have to say. Put it in the comments below. That's all I've got today. If you have any thoughts, feelings, questions, issues, anything you'd like me to talk about in the future, I'd love to hear it. Put it in the comments below. Tag me on Twitter. I will read it as much as I can. I know there was a slight gap between this video and the one last week. Professional and personal obligations sometimes take precedence. But thank you so much for watching. Keep those comments coming. I am reading them.